Hi there, welcome to the Dylan Rounds case. Today we do have an interesting, important map analysis looking back retrospectively and specifically concentrating on Don Hatley and his place of living, or should I say former place of living, his private land. I feel it's been undervalued within the investigation and search for Dylan Rounds, and maybe it's not truly being searched in comparison to the likes of the Grainshed property, Lucin Pond, and even Brenner's burnt down trailer, which is across the border in Nevada. That's why today I want to retell part of the story of the 28th of May 2022 regarding Dylan's death, but focusing on Brenner too because of what Brenner was doing and his direction, where he was going later on in the day, which ties in with Don Hatley, which ties in with the barbecue because it's in that location. Some things of interest may have been found along the way. For example, in the past, Ty Corbin with the John Deere hat found by another individual, in which Ty Corbin reported on YouTube. And that was near to the supposed private road of Don Hatley's, and it was half buried in the ground. So could it be a clue? Could it be part of a trail leading on to a bigger discovery? But it's just not been found yet because no one has been able to access that private land. What about the family? What about the police? The police have been there once in the past, but it wasn't directly to do with Dylan Rounds. It was more so to do with unrelated gun charges and all of that. We can make more sense of it later on. I just wanted to set the tone for today. We're doing a focused video, but it's an interesting one. And this time round, it's done with a visual representation, right? No photos of Don Hatley's trailer, no photos of inside. Don't seem to have that. I don't think anyone has. But we can at least look on, Google Earth to check the location, roughly speaking, of the place. Previously, I've done some videos talking about the importance. Unzip this. And you can always catch up on those videos if you go onto the I symbol, top right corner of the screen. Click on that button and you'll be redirected. Make sure to catch up on those previous videos so you're up to date of where we are right now and what we're talking about. For those that are currently here in this live premiere, welcome. Feel free to share your thoughts and opinions in the live chat box. And for anyone in general, you got a question, you want to elaborate on some points, leave your comments and thoughts down below under this video. Maybe after watching this, you can let me know what you think about the situation. Has Don Hatley, or at least his location, been undervalued in the case? Yes or no? Does it need searching or researching deeper? Yes or no? Leave your thoughts under this video. In addition, pinned comment by me down below, some additional links if you wish to check them out. If you want to support this channel in alternative ways, all the methods are there. I think with that being said and done, to set the scene, because it perfectly links into what we're talking about today with the ongoing theme, we can look back at the previous video and check the comments, because there's some key responses from Skeptical, and maybe there's some questions that may need answering too. Let's look at that first, and then we can head on over to the maps. Starting from the bottom, working our way up to the latest comments. First of all, we got a response here from Salty Pancakes, known as Salty Crew, in response saying, like beating a dead horse, facepalm. So basically, Salty Pancakes isn't too pleased with me covering the Dylan Rounds case. That's basically it. But at the end of the day, whilst I am supposedly, metaphorically beating a dead horse, at least the meat isn't being beat by another inmate. Exactly. But you see, there's about 4 rats that agree with him, lurking in the background, but there's about 5 people onwards that seem to agree with me. Okay? Skeptical said, yes, Raf, you may already know this phrase originated in the 17th century. Most humans have heard it used before. It's not very original and does not apply here. Well said. Badger Life, speaking of a dead horse, I hear your wife and girlfriend is a dead horse lay. April responds saying, did you wake up on the wrong side of your daddy today? Or Badger, yes, I did. I have my tent over his grave. So that clears out there. As for April, not quite sure if I've seen April before, but it looks like they've commented on Kenny Veach. So April, let me know, when did you come across my channel and how? I'm interested. Moving on, Cleo. Skeptical saying the involvement of Don Hatley in this case has always interested me. Thanks for taking the time to open up a discussion for theories. You're welcome. The thumbnail is eerily accurate. Young farmer meets cautionary old man, and that's me being nice, lurking in the background. Okay, summarising the thumbnail well. The information regarding the key fob came out much later due to the mistake of LE reporting on NamUs. That's true. In the early days, NamUs, the public database, there was a secondary one, the private NamUs database, which the police have access to, where the sensitive information is added onto that database, which the general public can't access, right? Problem was, LE at the time uploaded sensitive information onto the wrong database, the public one, hence why we were able to see it ourselves. So then later when Candice Cooley said the opposite, it seemed like information was switching and changing and that Candice Cooley was lying. Similar how Bob Farrell has labelled Candice Cooley a liar previously, right? But one way of understanding the situation, okay? It was the LE that messed up in the first place. They messed up. Candice Cooley had to go against that public information to try and save and preserve the case. Because sensitive information like that getting out and being leaked can harm the case, let's say legally speaking. So what Candice Cooley was advised to do at the time, from what she said, the police told her to go against it, to say that's not true, that it's false, to try and, clear up the mess of the LE. So in a way, Candice Cooley sacrificed her own credibility to try and protect the case of Dylan Rounds, which in the end made her look like a liar and a bad person when people didn't understand the situation. So there's all these little factors with time you can consider as to why information worked out the way it did and why some people came across as a liar, but either it's because a mistake was made or they had no choice but to go against it. Okay? Moving on. Skeptical. You're correct, Raf. Brenner asked Don Hatley to hold his guns after the family was alerted to the area and LE showed up. Yeah, I do remember hearing that previously. It's good Skeptical to reconfirm that with her own conscious mind, individual thoughts. That's appreciated. The reason why it happened later is because Brenner wasn't anticipating the fast response time of Dylan's parents and then the police and search and rescue. Brenner underestimated it, right? See, this is the thing. If you're in a rural area, very desolate, low population, hardly anyone passes through or visits you, it means you got the place to yourself. You haven't got prying eyes, you're not being watched, you're not being monitored, you're more likely to be able to get away with more things than if you was in an urban populated area. So if you're doing something illegal, breaking the law, you're probably going to do it at your own pace. You'll probably be slower in your approach, let's just say. So with Brenner taking out Dylan Rounds, Brenner had days and days, at least in his mind, to dispose of Dylan Rounds. But what Brenner wasn't anticipating, that a day or, 2 days or 3 days later, family come on down and then the police. So there was that sudden rush. Brenner thinking, oh no, all these people have come down. I haven't got rid of some of that other stuff. I best go and do it. I best pass the guns on to Don Hatley before police start knocking on my door, right? And that's how it played out. And then obviously Don Hatley with time got suspicious and thought, right, so this has happened with Dylan Rounds. Brenner has passed on firearms at the same time. Does one thing link with another? Well, if it does, I don't want to be associated with this, so I'm going to grass on my friend and protect myself. That's one way of looking at it, okay? But you know what? It does make more sense. And once again, I am surprising myself because I don't always think about this back then. I only talk about it now. Is that We've talked about Brenner doing a sloppy job. How could somebody bury Dylan and do it successfully well, but end up leaving a shirt about in his trailer which has DNA of it from Dylan and blood on that shirt, which links to that time-lapse footage video just after Dylan's death on the 28th? How can someone dispose of a body well, but then the other key bits of evidence do it so poorly? You know, is it even the same person doing it? It makes no sense. But when you understand the factor of lack of urgency and then that sudden rush later, it does make more sense, right? At the time of it all unfolding, Brenner would portray Dylan's body as high priority in terms of disposing of. As for the other stuff, maybe a bit of clothing, a hat, a wallet, let's just say, you know, bits of evidence like that and other stuff, including Brenner's own clothing, which had blood on, stains, right? You're going to dispose of the body as soon as you can or when you want, but that's going to be top of the list because it's the actual body, it's the actual person you've taken out. Stands out like a sore thumb, doesn't it? More so than a bit of clothing with blood on, which could be assumed by somebody at first glance as an injury, possibly a self-inflicted one or a farming accident. So you dispose of the body, Dylan Rounds, temporarily or one time only, depending what the form of desecration is. And then Brenner is like, do you know what? Oh, I'll forget about the clothing. Oh, I'll keep it in my trailer for now. And then the police come down and family come down a few days later. And it's like, oh, shit, wasn't expecting that. I bet get rid of some of that stuff. But because of that sudden urgency to be on the move and on the go, you end up neglecting things. You're being forgetful. You make mistakes. You slip up. And I think that's what Brenner did. He thought he had all the time in the world to clean himself up and clean the crime scene up. But he got more than what he bargained for. Hence why June 2nd, there was the spring cleaning. As you know, as shocking as it may appear, casually walking into the grain shed property, casually moving the grain truck, right, driving it out, in the presence of police and a detective officer questioning him, and he just casually says, spring cleaning. At the crime scene, Brenner has the audacity to do that, and yet he's untouchable and invincible at that moment, which most cases elsewhere, that wouldn't happen. Brenner would not be allowed to do that. But in that case, he was, right? He got very lucky. He was able to dispose possibly of even more key evidence, right? But in that urgency, Brenner forgot about the shirt in his trailer, right? If that shirt was removed, you know, there'd be less traces back to Brenner. That's what I'm getting at. First, a slow pace and then a sudden rush and making mistakes. That's what Brenner did. Hence why a good job became sloppy, right? That makes more sense now than it has done before, at least in my opinion. We've got Beatrice here saying, I think Brenner went to Don's place to get rid of Dylan's body parts. Just my thought. Okay, thanks for sharing your ideas there. I mean, I did touch upon the idea previously that maybe Brenner did take Dylan to Don's place and confess and say, can you help me in the disposing possibly. But Beatrice here says, I think Dylan's body parts were taken to Don's. So are you saying, Beatrice, that you think that Dylan could have been chopped up beforehand as a form of desecration? Let me know your thoughts there. I personally don't think Dylan was chopped up. That's just my opinion, okay? There's not been enough evidence to suggest being chopped up. The only reason why people consider that is because of the bloody spirit readers, card readers, and psychics, right? You know, you've had a couple of psychic mediums come along, but I think some of them have been more of an extra large. But moving on, Skeptical here says, both timestamps are true. What Skeptical is saying here is critical and important, okay? I do need to stress that. This is in response to the timing of a timestamp with the phone ping, the final one of Dylan's, which ended up at Lucin Pond, okay? there was conflict between 2:51 p.m. and 3:51 p.m. When I saw it on Mob Crew Chris, his was 3:51. When we saw it elsewhere in the past on East Idaho News, and maybe Doug's channel, it was 2:51. And it's like, well, there's two completely different times, right? Surely if it was 2:51, it would make more sense because it's, you know, from going to Grainshed to Pond, makes more sense. From leaving Grainshed and it arriving at 3:51, an hour later, did it take an hour to get from there to there? No, it doesn't. Let's read out Skeptical's comment now to set the record clear, okay? She says, both timestamps are true. Nevada is Pacific time zone 2:51. Utah is Mountain time zone an hour ahead 3:51. In contrast, New York is Eastern time zone 3 hours ahead at the time would have been 4:51. Okay, so neglect the 4:51 timestamp. 2:51, 3:51. It's the same exact thing that we were looking at. The only problem was on the maps that one timestamp, the 2:51 one, was in Nevada time zone. All the other timestamp phone pings were in Utah time zone. That's why there was a big difference between them, okay? So when we do go on the maps later, you will now see it corrected to 3:51 Utah Mountain time zone, okay? So in the past, where there was that big kerfuffle with Indiana 59 and the whole timing and being really critical of it, guess what, Indiana 59? It was all under control. It was just how it was presented by others with time, okay? Simply a time zone. That's it. So appreciate that, Skeptical. Good of you to explain. I am aware there was one other person that did explain it in the past, but I did forget, okay? But I'm definitely going to remember it now. Cleo says, appreciate your video, that's good. Got Glenn, shout out Glenn. Skeptical says, so, blood at Don Hatley's must be a rumour. Candice Cooley or Justin Rounds have never mentioned it, and Nate Eaton surely would have asked them about it. True, true. Yeah, I mean, if blood was supposedly on the trailer, right, on the outside, and police went down there, surely they would have seen it themselves, right? So does this rule out the whole meaning of this video? Absolutely not, because there is more to it than just blood on a trailer, okay? We got Sun, shout out to Sun. Thank you for your videos, Warlike Ref. Always appreciate your thoughts. Just ignore the uneducated haters. So I'm glad you like the videos and the dodgy photos as well. So that's all good there. We got Dawn Marie saying Don Hatley is involved up to his effing eyeballs. Do people agree with that? Maybe we can do it as a poll right now. Do you think Don Hatley is involved up to his eyeballs, or partially, or not at all? Let me know your thoughts down below. I don't know if I would say he is up to his eyeballs, but I do think he may play a role in some way or another, considering the way Justin Rounds has treated Don in the past on and off. And there must have been trigger points on and off for Justin to respond that way, and for Justin to think and feel that Don is responsible, such as the last time when Justin said to Don, you might be in Casper City, Wyoming, but maybe I'll pay you a visit and spill your guts. And that was a public post on Facebook, which was documented on my channel. Probably not the best choice of words, could be considered threatening language, could harm the Dylan Rounds case, and if Don was a witness or something, it could legally harm the case. But understandably, emotions can get the better of people. It's natural, it happens, right? So, whilst everyone likes to criticise Candice Cooley for her behaviour and actions at times, let's also acknowledge Justin Rounds too. There are strengths and weaknesses from each individual in the case and on the outside as well. Arguably, though, on the outside, as we know, a bit more dysfunctional and more misfits. But that aside, this is the focus for today. We've reached the end of the comments here. It's now time to get onto the main part of this video and look at the maps right now. Here we are. So as you can see, there's a lot of different timestamps and phone pings, but we don't need to focus on it all today because we've looked at it already. So we don't have to focus down here with Dylan and supposedly Brenna later lurking about on Dylan's property. We can neglect that for now. We don't even need to focus on the call made by Dylan earlier in the morning. We're just focusing on some of these timestamps here, okay? Now, you may wonder, where is the Jubilee truck timestamp? Well, that's for a separate video because it's a separate focal point which needs to be looked at, kind of similar to Don's Place. An event or location of interest which could be relevant to the case. We need to look at them bit by bit in case you're wondering, okay? Now, I did add some extra points on because they weren't added on in my previous project, such as supposedly Don Hatley's place. What I do find interesting, and I'll say it again, is how this is supposedly the location of Don's place, but then some people along the way said, no, it's not. It's actually Lucin Hill here, around there. So I don't know why it's so back and forth, but it seems to be more confirmed to be here, and you can see somewhat of a trailer and vehicle, so we'll go with that, like how we have done previously. I've added on a yellow marker, and the direction and route behind that is tying on with what Candice Cooley said in one of the early East Idaho News interviews about Brenner taking the back road. So I'd assume that's the back road because it looks like you're going back from the Grangeshed property, okay? And it does look like the back roads to me, the dirt roads away from the elsewhere. Either way, it goes in the same direction, okay? So let's just say, even if you went up to, do you call it the North Gate? Yeah, you'd call it the North Gate, somewhere over this way. You take that bend, you'd be in parallel, side by side with the wash. You would end up making it down to here, which is the pond, obviously, key timestamp, and then moving on this way, crossing the tracks there because there is a crossing, a proper one, and then making it to Don's Place. So we can measure the total distance as well, right? But let's just focus in on Brenner first of all in order to get to Don's Place, okay? So Brenner supposedly did what he did, 7:27 a.m. Before that, that's when Dylan was taken out. After that, that's when Brenner was in the presence and in possession of Dylan's phone. Dylan's phone ended up moving about after 7:27 in possession by Brenner, okay? Brenner moving about, maybe in the process of disposing Dylan and stealing things along the way or trying to find items of opportunity which will help with the disposing. As we know from then till now, he must have done a good job because Dylan hasn't been found yet, okay? So once that's done, whether it be a temporary burial or a permanent one, you may wonder, why are we even considering that? Because it is a form of desecration. I looked at it in the court documents in the past and it did give it as an example. Desecration is an umbrella term. It falls under possibly disposing of somebody, burying them once, chopping them up, cutting them up, burning body parts to destroy the body. That's a form of desecration. And then the other example is burying and then digging back up and then reburying after. And maybe that's what Brenner did. If he was short for time on the day and he was going to Don's Place to the barbecue later, maybe he just wanted to do a brief burial and then move on to Don's Place. And then after, confessing or not, disposing of Dylan the proper way after or the day later on Sunday when they had all day to do it, okay? And even Monday, early hours of Monday. That's if Brenner was up and ready by then. So arguably there was enough time to dispose of Dylan, okay? And I said it seems to have been somewhat successful. Now, with that in mind, do we have any key timestamps here which need to be mentioned? Not from the looks of it, okay? So what was the time when Brenner left here? Well, what we need to understand, after 7:43, it was 7:43 a.m. when past that's when Dylan's phone went down to Dylan's farm, Brenner being in possession. There for about 30 minutes. Got back to Brenner's trailer where it pinged at 8:23 a.m. and then remained there for the rest of the day. Now, for the rest of the day, up to the final phone ping, Brenner could have been still moving about, but just left the phone in the trailer. That's why it was stationary. That's a possibility, okay? So what Justin Rounds said, I think it was 1:30 or after 1:30 p.m, that's when Brenner decided to leave and go on to Don's place or so. Or at least that's when Dylan's phone ping was on the move again, okay? So you could go north there, turn left, go that way. You follow it to that yellow line and then Don's place is over in that distance. Or going south. And I'm assuming this is what the back roads is. So when Candice Cooley said later on in the day, in the afternoon, Brenner went to Don's place for the barbecue, right? Going down the back roads. Let's say Brenner was going down here. I'd assume he's in his own vehicle, right? Because I don't think he'd be walking. Driving down here, going through the gate, because obviously he has access to it. And then getting to the crossroad and either going on down here to take a right, down that way, or instead, this crossroad just beforehand, which isn't too far away from the gate, as you can see. Depends if you're allowed, well, I'm sure Brenner would, regardless. And driving down there, okay? Turning right here, let's rotate it round. Near to Lucin Hill, as you see just in front on screen. And proceeding onwards, let's say Brenner in his vehicle, driving on down. It just so happens to go through the wash, okay? Now, this is going to sound silly. Is there any small chance that Dylan's vehicle was driven by Brenner to Don's place for the barbecue? Might sound a bit weird. Surely Don would be questioning Brenner, right? But maybe that was when Brenner decided to confess. I don't know. I'm just thinking, because if people want to push the idea that Dylan's truck went through a wash, well, it could have done on the day when Brenner was simply getting from point A to point B to Don's place, right? Now, if that's not the case at all, okay. What I want to question, and it's not come up much, okay? Yes, we know Brenner went to Don's place to the barbecue. Okay, how did he get there? Did he drive there himself? Yes or no? And was it in his own vehicle? Yes or no? If it was in his own vehicle, then surely the state of his vehicle and underneath the wheel arch, wouldn't it be somewhat muddy or a bit messy, dusty underneath to show that it's been used and it's been driven off-road, similar to how Dylan's truck looked? Right, just a question there if anyone can answer it. And I say that because, as said, when you follow this road and you follow the route, or as Americans say, route, from Grangeshed property down here past Lucin Hill, on the way, right, on the way, going through a wash, as you see here. Can you see it? There, dips down. This is the wash. The wash that's been referred to in the past. The wash that if you follow it over into that direction and distance over that way, which ends up going west and approaches Nevada side, I think just before that, before crossing on over the border, you follow that wash all the way down, and that's when that helicopter on the 5th of June 2022 ended up recording the track marks in the wash in that direction, which caught Candice Cooley's interest at the time, and that's when the whole theories and ideas started forming as to where Dylan could have been taken and where he was disposed of, right? But just to highlight that, it looks as if with the route that was taken, Brenner would have gone into the wash, driving on in, and then coming out the other way. And then once driving down this way, approaching the railroad tracks, just on the right-hand side, is Lucin Pond. And obviously there is a little turn-off point, as you see here, where it's slightly different in colour, where you can park up, okay? You can see some turnabouts as well. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but has it changed? Has it changed the map, how it looks visually? I'm just wondering, because where's that car parking slot where a vehicle was parked up on the side? There used to be a vehicle parked up there, like an SUV, somewhere there. It's not there now. I can't check the year of this imagery, but something tells me that this might be a bit more updated than the last time we looked. because the colour of it is different. Last time round it was really green, this time round it's a bit more muddy. Correct me if I'm wrong, it just looks a bit different to the last time I checked. But nevertheless, right, the location of Lucin Pond, a key area of interest where dogs may or may have not picked up final hits in that location with time, 2022 or 23 onwards. This was the spot where Dylan's phone was found, I believe 18th, 19th of June, okay? And then later, where the forensic dive was done, and around 14th of November, they end up finding that time-lapse footage on Dylan's phone depicting Brenner cleaning a gun with blood on him, and the 7:27 a.m. timestamp, which ties in with Dylan's presence at the place and what likely happened to him around that point, within a 30-minute difference. Okay? So that's the backstory there. But what about the timestamp, though, on the day? 3:51 p.m. Dylan Round's phone ping. Final one at Lucin Pond. Later found in Lucin Pond. Okay? So the final ping being here, probably because the phone died on itself when thrown into water. Now, I can understand why Brenner would chuck it into water, because you'd be thinking that's the best way of destroying any evidence and destroying any traces. But maybe because of the age Brenner is, he doesn't understand how technology has advanced with time and how you can retrieve stuff even if the phone is damaged, right? Maybe way back in the past you had certain devices and stuff which could be destroyed more easily. It's harder now because there's more traces, and especially online, you get the digital footprint, which is harder to remove. So Brenner maybe underestimated it, but he thought it was the best thing to do at the time. So 3:51 p.m, right? So by 3:51 p.m, Brenner is at Lucin Pond. 51 minutes beforehand, though, is when the Jubilee truck was seen leaving the Grainshed property, okay, the other way, where we came from. Take that into consideration, okay? Now, flipping the screen, let's say Brenner's done what he's done, disposed of the phone. Now, what does he do? Where does he go? Well, he continues on to Don's place. So gets back in his vehicle, drives up this way, parallel with the tracks, reaching the crossing here, as you can see. That's the crossing. And then swerving in and out, and then reaching this little dirt road on the side, which is supposedly a private road, okay? And it was near to this area where Ty Corbin referred to how a previous person found a John Deere hat, okay? If that John Deere hat was of Dylan's, why was Brenner in possession of it at the time on the 28th when driving up here to Don's place? Did Brenner have Dylan's body in the back seat of his vehicle? I wonder, right? That's what we're trying to figure out. So, at the time, Brenner proceeding onwards down this way, coming around this bend, which is kind of, obscured by the view, a blind spot, to be honest, where Don's place is situated. As for Lucin Airport, is over that way in the distance. I don't know as for cameras or any surveillance if it would pick anything up from this distance or not. We're going around this bend here where Don's place supposedly is, or was, let's say, and then the barbecue occurring. Now, we've always said, what happened at the barbecue? What was talked about? Casual conversations, or did Brenner confess? Or was it obvious to Don that something had happened because of the way Brenner looked, or how he dressed and how he appeared? Because, to be honest, if we look back to 7:27 in the morning, Brenner was wearing the clothes in which he probably wore when he killed Dylan, hence why he had blood on him and DNA of Dylan on the shirt, okay? Blood on his hands, blood on his sleeves. And whilst he washed himself off earlier on in the day, was it at that point Brenner changed clothes or not? If he kept the same clothes on and went to Don's place, surely Don would have been suspicious and noticed something was wrong because Brenner was covered in blood with the blood stains, right? So it's making me think that at 7:27 in the morning onwards, Brenner changed his clothes, hid his top, put it away in a reckless fashion, didn't dispose of it immediately, hence why it was found later by police when the investigation was underway, right? And I guess Brenner forgot all about it too. So maybe Brenner was in fresh clothes or just in different clothing, hanging out with Don. How long for? Not quite sure. And then when Brenner left, did Don go with him or not? Don't quite know. But did Brenner, at any point, any time when he was around Don on the day of the 28th, did he confess to Don? Did he mention anything at all? It kind of makes you think, using common sense, if it was at a later point, days later, when Brenner decided to pass the firearms to Don and the excuse was, well, I've got in trouble in the past with police. I don't want it to happen again because my items would be confiscated. At that point, Don not being aware that Brenner was responsible for Dylan's death and the police presence, right? So it makes you think, if Brenner actually confessed to Don Hatley on the 28th, surely days later when police came down, if Brenner attempted to pass the firearms on to Don, Don would have rejected and said, no, you've told me what you've done to Dylan. If these are the items which were used to take Dylan out, I want no part of that. I don't want to hold on to the murder weapon. You're going to make me look like a bad person. I'm going to get in trouble for that. I don't think Don is that stupid to fall for that. So it made me think that maybe Brenner didn't confess to Don or tell the full story, right? And to be honest, it would also make you think that it would make sense for somebody to help Brenner when disposing of Dylan. But if Don was to assist, and then it was later when Brenner passed over the firearms to Don, surely Don wouldn't want any part of that because it incriminates him. Unless it didn't bother him at the time because he was already like, well, I've already assisted you in disposing of Dylan, so I've already committed a crime there. I wonder, what was the trigger point for Don reaching out to police, doing the interview with the FBI, surrendering over the firearm, the .22 rifle? Why did Don do that? Because he didn't want to get in trouble? What, on unrelated firearm charges as how it was treated at the time? Or to be associated with the blame of Dylan Round's death or desecration? Which one was it? Was Don trying to keep a clean profile so he didn't get any unwanted charges on him unrelated to the case, or is it because he didn't want to be associated with the case of Dylan? Was he even aware of Brenner being responsible, right? It's trying to figure those things out. Saving oneself, but why exactly? For unrelated charges or related charges to Dylan? What was it with Don? Okay? So, have I talked my way out of all this? I wouldn't say so. I'm just trying to put it all into perspective. The fact that Brenner was on site here on the same day he murdered Dylan Rounds, from the looks of it, yeah, it's quite significant, right? Anywhere where Brenner goes on that day is an important location because it makes you wonder, why did Brenner go here or there? Was he trying to dispose of things? Such as, why did Brenner stop at the pond? Well, to dispose of the phone, right? And then you say, well, why did Brenner go to Don's place for the barbecue? Because it was already organised and he wanted to do that, I guess. But what was found along the way later? Supposedly a John Deere hat near to the private road of Don's, right? Dylan Rounds wears John Deere hats, so there could be a possible link there. Never confirmed, never brought back up again, which is very unfortunate. Canis Cooley's never mentioned it, I don't think. And there was just some additional information by maybe Weezer or some other Montello local in which how it was found and how it appeared it was half buried. I don't know if that means anything or not. Maybe it was originally buried, but then with time, with rain and weathering, it kind of washed it away from the dirt, so it was revealed more. But then again, would that mean that it was purposely buried in the first place? It sounds very silly, in a way, burying little bits and bobs all over the place, spread out but not that far away, that people will eventually find it like it's some kind of treasure hunt. But if you think about it, was Brenner trying to set Don Hatley up from the beginning? Whilst it could be perceived the other way, where people have been playing Brenner and pinning the blame onto him and making him look more guilty than what he is, that he's actually innocent and a fall guy. What about Don Hatley, right? Brenner is all about himself. You could say Brenner is selfish, right? So you follow the trail, okay? Near to the pond. Well, at the pond. Phone found disposed of. Brenner did it, supposedly. Past that point, crossing over the railroad tracks near to Don's place, a John Deere hat found later. Is it of Dylan's? Maybe, maybe not. And then at Don Hatley's place of living, his trailer, supposedly the rumour of blood on the side of the trailer. What I'm trying to get at is, it looks like a possible form of direction-based evidence. Like you find some evidence and it creates a trail along the way. You follow it and follow it up to the end point. And from where these items are placed, it's along the route which Brenner supposedly took to get to Don's place. So was Brenner in the background trying to covertly pin the blame onto Don? Is that an alternative way of looking at it? And that's why the final nail in the coffin, final attempt, was for Brenner to pass those firearms onto Don. So then that when police find evidence along the way, that they'll be directed to Don's place, find the firearms, and then Don's the one who gets all in trouble and only in trouble. It didn't work out like that, did it? But it could have done. That's one way of looking at it. You seen Brenner, how he was in Weber County Jail. He called the father, Justin Rounds, later in 2022 and said how Chase Venstra is the one. Right? Whilst you can say, while some people can argue and say Brenner was pleading his innocence, could it be a last-ditch, desperate attempt of pinning the blame on somebody else out there, which Brenner doesn't like and wants somebody else to take the fall? People don't seem to look at it that way. It's either people think or believe that Brenner is the killer, and then the others believe that Brenner is very innocent. What this situation is, and it's not been compared to before, I don't think, is the Bryan Kohberger case, in which it's divided. Some people believe he's guilty, others believe he's innocent. Now, I know there might be some additional factors to take in mind, blah, 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 but in a rough way of comparing, it can be, right? So, referring back to Don's place, police did go and visit the area, okay, days later in June. Early June, I think. Well, early to mid-June. Police came across the firearms, right? And then action was taken from there, and eventually Brenner was the one responsible and got in trouble because Don grassed on him, okay? So besides the police presence gaining access to the private land of Don's place, what else did the police do here? Not much. Did they treat this area as a crime scene? No. Did they treat it with the same level of focus as the Grainshed property? No. And as we know, Grainshed property wasn't exactly treated like a crime scene to begin with. Don's place, I guess you could say, was neglected. The only reason why police were here was to do with an unrelated charge, or at least leading to an unrelated charge in the Dylan Rounds case. So it's separate, it doesn't link. But what does link to the Dylan Rounds case is that Don knows Dylan, Brenner knows Dylan, vice versa, and that Brenner went to Don's place on the day and the day Dylan died, okay, in the correct timeline order. So for Brenner to come on down here, you could assume that was Brenner trying to dispose of things along the way. Well, there's some evidence which would suggest that, as we just looked at before, and as well maybe talking with Don, figuring something out, possibly by a small chance, right? I mean, there's always that chance that maybe the 29th, the day later, Sunday, maybe they hung out in this area once again, or Brenner tried coming on down here to do something. You don't know, right? We would have a better understanding if a proper investigation took place in this area, considering Don was a person of interest in the early days, and Brenner, of course, being in this area, right? You think back to June 2nd, days after, right, this all unfolding, spring cleaning, Don, Hatley and Brenner both taking off to Wendover, supposedly, with all the bin bags in the back of the vehicle from the spring cleaning. Key important evidence, and they just casually drove off into the sunset just like that, south. Well, I think it was south. Well, that sounds great, doesn't it? What a wasted opportunity. No attempt was made to follow the people and see where they went. But they said that, if we knew where they went or where the things were disposed of, we could look for them. I mean, Lance Kelly took it upon himself to search for those items. Unsuccessful, but an attempt was made at some point, if you remember. Now, I think at the end of the day, the theme and factor with Don's place, and it's an issue, is because of the whole private land situation. Like, you need access, you need to be allowed on it. But if police were able to gain entry just like that, if police cared enough, they could have gained entry again and actually tried searching this area by digging up the ground, right? Because who knows what could be buried here, right? Maybe there's not much on ground, on base level, but underneath, have any drones been used here, right? 2022 onwards up to now, whether it be by the organisations, the search and rescue crew, the police, or Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds, the family, have any of them gone over here and used a drone, the full spectral drone for soil disturbance? Has any dogs been used, cadaver dogs in this area? If not, it seems like a wasted opportunity, right? Brenner was once here on the day Dylan died, and you're not even considering checking this place out as a place of interest. You're just merely treating it as an unrelated charge to a separate case. That just sounds so reckless, right? What you need to remember, and it really puts it into perspective, okay? You've seen how many times Lucin Pond has been searched, Dylan's place, Grainshed property, places of interest where Dylan was or Brenner was, right? They were dealt with, they were searched. Was it private land? Yes or no? I guess so, but maybe under different ownership, so it was easier to reach out to. But I'm sure if the police or family requested to search Don's place, I'm sure they would have had some success, right? It was done by the police the first time round, at least. Now, I do remember Lucin Pond when Ty Corbin went in 2023, early 2023, he had to ask for permission and he was allowed to walk around here, right? So I guess you need permission. Owned or near to the railroad community, okay, fair enough. I think that's how it was worded in the past. So if you need access, entry, approval to go to a certain place and you can do that, then why can't you do the same thing for Don Hatley's place, right? Private land or not, permission or not, if you can do it here, why can't you do it over there? Is it because it's more strict? Simply asking if you can search or not isn't going to get you in trouble. Outright going on the land without permission could get you in trouble. But once again, there's no surveillance. There's nobody out there. So who would really know? And I want to put in perspective, Taylena in recent time. If you didn't know who Taylena was, it's the daughter of Kurt Wadsworth. So everybody watching right now, you may wonder, well, what's their username on YouTube? Well, it's the person called Stifler's Mom. Stifler's Mom with a Donald Trump profile picture. Originally, I think they were called Not For You or something, maybe. Taylena, the daughter of Kurt Wadsworth. So they have been watching very closely in this case and on my channel, and they were even present last night when talking about hypocrites and people who are harming the case and not sticking with the truth. Okay? Just as a reference, so, regular viewers know who is who and know exactly who I'm referring to. Taylena in recent times said, well, in response to my question, the reason why people don't give coordinates to the place of Don Hatley's is because it would be robbed. People could go down there and ransack it, and it would be troublesome. It wouldn't do much good. But let me just remind myself and remind people in general that, to be honest, if people really wanted something, especially out there, and some of the type of people that are out there, they will find a way one way or another, coordinates or not. So it's it doesn't matter coordinates or not. And to be honest, speaking about coordinates, not a single person responded saying, I'm not giving you coordinates because it could harm the location or harm the case. No one said that. So when it came to Ty Corbin, when it came to Lance Kelly, they seem to know the location, they seem to be very familiar with the places, and they pinpoint this and that out, but they can't and never provided coordinates, right? Take this in mind, Taylina, and many other people out there. I'm not even from the US, but when it came to the Kenny Beach case and Nevada, Mojave Desert, Joe May Canyon, Sheep Range, Picture Canyon, etc., when people wanted coordinates, I gave them very, very accurate coordinates. I'm not even from the area. I'm not even from the US, yet I seem to know more about places in the US than people in the US do themselves, right? It really sets a tone that, okay? But in reference to the experts and the boots on ground individuals, not a single person provided coordinates. It was unfortunate, okay? I did ask, no one responded. The odd vague description was given by the odd person out there. Oh, it's north, or it's miles over that way. It's not exactly helpful, is it? Coordinates are pinpoint locations and time efficient. If a person's going to record the place on camera and publicly upload it to YouTube, it's no different to providing the coordinates because, as said, some people may have a photographic memory. Some people may not need to rely on coordinates. Just a simple photo or pointer will do, in which then they'll go over there and check it out for themselves. So beginning with, to just even record the place of Don's and upload it online publicly where anyone can see it. If that's allowed, then I'm sure getting coordinates isn't a crime either. Encroaching onto the land is a different story. But as I said, because it's out there and it's lawless and you don't get a police presence that much, and when there is one, they don't seem to care much, the LE as example with the Dylan Rounds case, people can do what they want and at times get away with it, right? So it's not stopping anyone from going to Don's place. Yet it did on this exception. Out of all the things that have happened out there and in Montello, good, bad, very bad, ugly, underground, whatever you want to call it, yet Don Hatley's place was just a little bit underwhelming in the investigation of Dylan Rounds, don't you think? Don't you think more could have been done? A little bit more effort? You know, if you're going to use all this equipment and go to that extent with time, such as with the family, such as with Texas EquuSearch, etc., why couldn't they apply it here? Now, if at any point people have true information to debunk and say this area was checked, was searched more than once, and the ground was dug up, that is great, but I have not heard that yet. I've never heard it mentioned by Candice Cooley or Justin Rounds. You know what the very interesting thing is? Justin Rounds was so hell-bent on Don Hatley in a negative way, as if Justin knew that Don was responsible in some way or another, or at least knew something which he wasn't telling anyone, right? And because of that, it started early on and it occurred later too. Why didn't Justin Rounds at any point go down to Don's place to check in on him, or at least search about the property? Whether he's allowed to or not, Justin Rounds was a man on a mission at the time and would do anything it takes to get Dylan back. So why didn't they check Don's place out? Why didn't they turn the ground upside down, etc.? It's as if there's some kind of protective shield in this area. Anyone that approaches it is pushed away like a dark force. You get what I'm saying? You could say at the end of the day, this is such an insignificant place for whatever reason, yet why can't it just be checked to tick it off the list? The police went down, but they weren't treating it as the Dylan Rounds investigation. They were treating it as an unrelated gun charge, etc. in the process of that, right? Now, the reason, besides Brenner simply being present here on the day, which is a critical timeline, why else was Brenner here for? And what else did he do here, right? Besides the rumour of blood on a trailer. If this area wasn't searched, wasn't dug up, missed opportunity. And you know why it really puts it in perspective and speaks volume is that miles, over 20 miles away in distance, over 20 miles away from the crime scene, across the border, Nevada, round this area. I don't know if I'll be able to find it immediately. I'll just try and zoom in first. I want to put it into perspective, right? You've got mine area there. Boom. Brenner's trailer. Brenner's former trailer, former place of living, over 20 plus miles away from the crime scene of where Dylan Rounds was supposedly murdered by Brenner, and yet this burnt down old trailer and old place of living by Brenner was thoroughly investigated, I believe, by Weber County. The other LE, the main LE, didn't bother, but alternative county police did have a presence here and did search it. Candice Cooley wasn't so sure about the place, but when the likes of Ty Corbin and Lance Kelly investigated it themselves and tried reporting it into the police did take it serious and did tie it with the Dylan Rounds case. It was treated because this was a place where Brenner once lived, so maybe Brenner went back here to dispose of Dylan Rounds. Let's just use that as an example, right? Whether things were planted there or not by certain people, as people have suggested, right? It just makes you think, if the police take an area like this so seriously and treat it to the Dylan Rounds case investigation that Dylan could be here and may have been buried, you know, I think cadaver dogs were used, ground penetrating equipment as well, checking for soil disturbance, digging things up. They found nothing in this area from what was said publicly, but it made the news. Lance Kelly's footage and Salty Pancakes footage made the news in relation to this, although Salty Pancakes was miles away on a bloody main road, but somehow still managed to appear on camera, in a way. But that aside, irrelevant. The fact that this area was treated seriously and yet it was so far away from the crime scene, yet it was still checked. It was still searched. Was there any proof or timestamps or phone pings to say Brenner was here on the day of Dylan's death? No. So there wasn't really any evidence to point in this direction, but because it was a former place of Brenner, the history of it carried enough weight in order for a warranted investigation to take place. So if something so minuscule like a place like this and not so related to the case of Dylan's death can be investigated 20 miles plus away from the scene of the crime, then why on earth can't Don's place, which is significantly closer to Brenner, significantly closer to the crime scene, and on the day Brenner heading this way, as well as disposing Dylan's phone and being in the presence of Don, why can't this place be checked as thoroughly as Brenner's burnt down trailer? You get what I'm saying? It's crazy. It's ridiculous. As said, from all the news interviews and articles, etc., I've not once heard or saw anyone thoroughly investigating this area and turning the land upside down. It could be a missed opportunity. It's not a guaranteed ticket in justice or finding Dylan, but it's a key opportunity, and every opportunity should be taken and acknowledged, right? So, yeah. And in addition, let's just remind ourselves that later on, was it towards the end of 22 or going into 23 at the time, when Don Hatley moved away and went to Casper Sitting, Wyoming, and his trailer was left abandoned in that area, right? So yeah, okay, Don took his valuables with him. What was left behind, though? A trailer, and that was it? What about the ground itself? Did Don get away from the area because of what's previously happened or what he may have got himself involved with? Did he get away because he knew Justin was onto him and wasn't too pleased? You know, you think of all the people who are responsible in the case in some way or another, or have been referred to as being a person of interest. How many of those individuals have fled and ran away from the area? That's what you got to work out. Correct me if I'm wrong, but besides Ed Harshbarger, which was, I think on the day Ed Harshbarger was miles away, going somewhere on a road trip, possibly, was the day Dylan was taken out. So Ed was away from the area. As for Chase Venstra, although some people in the background are saying that, oh, the CCTV wasn't verified to do with Chase being elsewhere, at least from how the original story went, Chase Venstra seen on CCTV further afar, miles away, okay? But I'm just talking about whether it be on the day or more so the events after. Who left? Who ran away, in a sense? Seems like Don Hatley, right? You didn't see Brenner run away. Not even at the start. Brenner remained on site like nothing ever happened. Was that the right thing to do or not? I don't know. But I guess running away at the time, sometimes that's perceived as more suspicious. You're running away from your problems and maybe trouble that you've caused. So I get that. As for Don Hatley, he didn't leave immediately, but he did leave later, so there could be some motives behind that. But the fact that the area is now abandoned, right? Who's going to know if somebody searches about? You don't even have to record it, do you? Now, this is no means advertising or advocating for somebody going onto private land and breaking laws, but all I'm saying is, considering the type of people that are out there, you do get a few bad eggs breaking laws anyway, who get away with stuff and do much worse, right? So just put it into perspective. So that's my reasoning behind this area, okay? Brenner was present, a person of interest, early on, and then treated as the main suspect. In the presence of Don on the day, what conversations took place, and the fact that certain bits of evidence was found on the way on Brenner's route makes you think, was anything else dumped near to the trailer, right? To pin the blame onto Don in the future, or I don't know, just to dispose of stuff on the way because Brenner felt like it. I just think that this area needs to be checked out. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down below. Do you agree with my chain of thoughts and my ideas? Because I do genuinely believe it's a valid comparison. The fact that Brenner's former place of living, so far away from the crime scene, and really no phone pings or evidence to suggest activity on that day of the 28th over that way, it was checked out, it was searched, effort was put in. Why can't the same occur at Don's place? Or why didn't it back then, right? As said, you'll see me, I do make comparisons with time, whether it be comparisons of my experiences, which I can apply to a general topic, or comparisons of events and locations which have previously happened, the lack of it, or in contrast, the extent something's gone to, right? Is to put it into motion, into perspective, right? So, for example, last night, because we might as well acknowledge it, the odd person here and there thinking that what I'm doing is a waste of time. The definition of wasting one's time is where you actively engage or participate in something and you gain no value. You get nothing out of what you've done. That would be considered a waste of time. But I'm not. What I'm gaining is opportunity and perspective and guiding people and spreading awareness and, you know, being honest, content for the channel, right? The definition here, for some people that may not be aware, Christy, I don't know if you saw my comment down below, but I'll just reiterate it here. Whether it be about the case or part of the case and community, it's about turning a negative event into a positive event, which tails in with spreading awareness at the same time. It's perfectly under control. There are perfect opportunities along the way. There is no derailment and there is absolutely no wasted time because a lot of the stuff that comes out of my mouth is of importance and worth, whether it be to people that need guidance or to people that may want to learn about something. There is no wasted time there. And the fact that some of my videos in the past, as long as they may be, and as much as I may talk for, it has saved a few people's lives. So at the end of the day, if my videos are considered a waste of time and that I'm wasted my life doing this, yet I've saved people's lives along the way, I don't know what else I can say to that, right? It's all under control here. I know what I'm doing, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be doing it. And as said, as for all this energy conservation, that's under control, right? The more you do it, the more you adapt, the less energy you expel. I've been from one extreme to the other, unrelated other stuff in life. I've used a lot of energy up. I've been on the receiving end. It wasn't worth it. absolutely wasn't worth it. I went to the absolute depths and extremes other humans can't reach. So I know exactly what I'm doing in these situations. So in terms of this video itself, didn't require too much energy because the projects are already there, the pinpoints are already there, the story is already in here. It's about piecing it together with time, stitching it together. There's already prompts, there's already a timeline. It's just about mixing it all together finally to come up with new points and perspectives. So whilst we focused on Don Hatley's place of living today, a different day tomorrow or a few days later, we can look at the importance and focus of the Jubilee truck and the meaning behind that. Because what we looked at today and where Brenner was at the time, going towards Don's place, the Jubilee truck was leaving the grain shed around that time. So putting it into perspective, who was what, where was where, and what were they doing? What was the overall motive behind it all? Well, we'll make more sense of that in time with another map analysis, combine it with the one today. And if there's any questions you have or any key points and information you want to add on from this video, or information you want to add on about the Jubilee truck, I can include all that in the next video. So in between now and then, leave your comments down below. Feel free to like and share the video to spread the awareness to help keep the Dylan Rounds case alive on YouTube, on this particular platform, and we'll see what happens next. Leave it there for now. Appreciate people's patience, and especially people's patience from last night because it was a long one. And yeah, goodbye, good night for now.